Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar all about disaster recovery in the cloud. My name is Troy Lijedahl. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering here at Backblaze. Off to a wonderful start already.
Morning, Troy.
Joining me today, we have a few folks. So we have Greg Tellone, who's the CEO of Cloud Instant Backup Recovery. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having us today.
Excellent. And also joining us is Marty Williams, Senior Solutions Architect at Veeam. Marty, how's it going?
Going good. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be part of this panel and discuss some great opportunity for CloudIBR.
Cool.
Awesome. So for those of you joining us, I see we have a couple people chiming in already. Jimmy Chow says hello from Brandon, Missouri. Welcome, Jimmy. Will Robinson is asking if we're going to have coffee. Well, there'll be an announcement. Some of you may have come for a coffee card. Check the announcements for some more information about that in a moment. But let me give you a little rundown of what we're going to be talking about today here, right? The big topic that everyone's interested in, disaster recovery, right? Maybe you've had to deal with recovering from a disaster. Maybe you're planning for a disaster. We're going to talk a bit about, kind of the landscape of where things are, what your options are, where things like Veeam, CloudIBR, and Backblaze fit in, and really how to make things simple so anyone can get started with disaster recovery. Greg's going to give us a great demo. And of course, we want to take questions from you to make sure that you get all your questions answered. Then at the very end, we'll do a quick wrap up. And I want to tell you about a special promo that we're going to be running for attendees of this webinar. So make sure you stick around so you can find out more about that. So ransomware is a big issue. Disasters are a big issue. For those of you who are, managing complex infrastructures, you understand, right? Having a backup is really important, but having a reliable backup and planning how to get that backup is really the part a lot of folks aren't thinking of. Just having a backup isn't enough, right? Obviously there's a huge need. We actually got all these numbers from our friends at Veeam, who do a great annual report on these great statistics about the impact that disasters have on businesses, right? So we can see, right, average cost of downtime, $1,400 a minute. That's huge, right? You're down for, 2 hours, that adds up. Data breaches, right? Bad actors. These people are costing businesses time and money. I think the biggest striking data point there is the one at the bottom there, right? That the global annual cost of cybercrime is predicted to reach $8 trillion in 2023. And then we're in 2024, but by 2025, $10 trillion. That's more than the GDP of most countries, right? So it's no joke. Marty, I don't know if obviously you're talking to folks all day that are dealing with this. I just can't imagine, how much impact you're seeing in the field.
Yeah, and one of the things that's not on here, that's not included in this, is the rising cost of cyber insurance, right? So we all know businesses that are required to or are looking to get cyber insurance as part of their business plan, that rising cost is going up as well. Because of these costs going up, the cyber insurance costs are going up. So you have to try to find ways, just like your car insurance, right? Like if you're a safe driver and you can prove that you don't do things, like by putting a little thing in your car that you don't speed and you don't get tickets, and that helps get your car insurance down. The same thing with the cyber insurance. When you can prove your testing and that your backup strategy is not only doing backups, but you can recover from your backups, that helps reduce that cost. So that's part of it. The other part of it, and maybe I can't remember if it's on another slide a little bit later on, but is always those customers that have a strategy and get hit with ransomware and they don't get fully recovered. Right? They might have used their backups or they've paid the ransom and they still don't get 100% back the data that they lost. So those are some key statistics as well to add on top of this.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee you get, if you pay a ransom, right? You get affected by ransomware, you get the ransom. There's no guarantee you get that back, right?
Right.
You're giving money to someone who's a bad guy. Doesn't mean a bad guy is going to necessarily keep his word, right? So, kind of moving on from that, right? And I think, Greg, I'm really going to rely on your expertise on this slide here. Talking about, what Marty just said, you have to test your disaster recovery, right? Your plan. And I'm kind of curious, Greg, in your experience, like, what are you seeing? How are folks testing this, and how often are they testing their disaster recovery plans?
So overwhelmingly, not often enough is the typical answer. The slide the part of this slide I love the most is in the top on the right side, top left of it, where it says there's 18% have orchestrated workflows. That right there, that's what makes you recoverable, is having all that in place and testing it on a regular basis. And as you can see from the numbers on the left side, people don't test it enough, and those numbers are pretty accurate from what we see, with people that we meet. And kind of there's a lot of reasons why. We'll get into that as we go through this, but one of our mission statements is to help people become part of that 18% group, and become an 18%er and do it, cost effectively and easily, rather than, with all the complexity that traditionally goes along with DR.
Yeah. So I think we want to throw out a poll right now, because I love, hearing from the folks that are, tuning in today. Just to get an idea of what our customers, people tuning in, are doing for their disaster recovery plans. So please make sure that you reply to that. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so the 18%, that's really interesting, Greg. So what you're saying is most folks today don't have any kind of orchestration for their disaster recovery.
What we see is, so a lot of people have backup. Everyone, I'd say, has backup. But if you don't have immutable backups, then you pretty much don't have good backups, because we're seeing, everyone has seen it, that the attackers, the bad actors, are encrypting the backups at the same time as they're encrypting your production data, and they have it all scripted out to all happen at once. The only way to protect against that is have immutable backups. So you should have, following the 3-2-1 rule. That rule has even been expanded upon. So I like to say have, 3 immutable backup copies, with at least 2 offsite. And you want to, that's how you protect your backups from those bad actors.
Nice.
And we'll add on to that with Veeam. Now we call it the zip code, right? 32110.
10, yeah.
2 copies. And at the end of the day, that other 1 and the 0 is testing it, right? I've tested my backups, which then gives me the 0, which means 0 opportunity for data loss, right?
Absolutely. So in the world of disaster recovery, there's a few different options, right? And maybe, Greg, you can kind of talk a little bit about the different options that exist today, and maybe where CloudIBR fits in.
Sure. So quick background on myself. I got into the disaster recovery industry back when I was 19 years old. I started at a company called Cheyenne Software, the original makers of ArcServe. And when they were interviewing me, they saw ArcServe on my resume. They asked, where do you use ArcServe? And I said, well, I use it in my home lab to back up my Novell NetWare 2.12 network. So the interviewer immediately brought in, she brought in like 3 tech. They all interviewed me. I talked about loading, unloading NLMs and all the stuff that we did back in the NetWare days. I got hired on the spot, and I worked there for many years doing tech support and then doing UAT for the dev team. And then went on to McKinsey & Company. I built out their DR strategy up in IBM's Sterling Forest location. And in 2000, we started continuity centers to do disaster recovery as a service, provide, DRaaS, and back then it was T1s and tape drives. T1 was high speed back then. But what we've seen is the complexity and the amount of money that you need to spend to have a really good DR plan can be really super expensive, as well as super complex. And because of the complexity, it stops people from testing it as often as they should. Even with cloud-based recovery, you're somewhat eliminating the need for a physical infrastructure that you need to maintain between a site A and a site B. But it still has the complexities of working with some of the public cloud providers that for enterprises, that's a no-brainer. It's easy for them. But for the masses, small and mid-sized firms, they don't have the expertise to be working in the public cloud. So they need something that's, that they're more familiar with. And that's where we came up with CloudIBR, which is a DRaaS product that does full recovery of your Veeam backups from Backblaze into the bare metal cloud.
Nice.
Yeah.
So really, there's as you just said, right? Having an offsite, having a full replication somewhere, that's kind of the traditional disaster recovery model, but it's very expensive, maybe complex. You may need, people as smart as yourself, Greg, to help manage that for you, right? You have the cloud option with something like CloudIBR, or you have these other kind of managed services, backup recovery as a service that can help with that. Go ahead,
on
Marty.
to that. Don't forget that number one, that traditional disaster recovery site, that requires admin level too, right? Like those servers that are in the DR site need to be managed and monitored and updated, firmware patches. So it's not just the cost of that secondary data center and that hardware, but it's also the administrator has to keep those up to date just as much as they do the production, right? So it is a whole nother set of hardware that needs to be maintained and monitored. And is it fast enough, right? A lot of times what you'll see people do is they do their 3-year cycle of new hardware production and they roll the old hardware to DR. Well, that's if it's not performing for you in production, it's not going to perform for you at disaster either. So this was just some things to consider as well, not just the cost of the hardware and everything, but the admin time.
And you bring up another point that I'm reading into is, especially when you're running that yourself with your own site A and site B for DR, they have to be connected via IP. They need to have full access to each other. And what we've seen one too many times is that when the attackers get access to your production network, they also get access to your DR network. So they're able to encrypt and attack everything at once. That is definitely slightly mitigated when you go with a DRaaS provider, as long as they're putting it behind some type of air gap. But if the two sites have full site-to-site connectivity, then the admin credentials that work in site A are also going to work in site B, which is what the hackers are going after.
Yeah. So just to go back to those polls we ran a few moments ago, I do want to touch. It sounds like most people that answered, what kind of plan status you have in place, they have a somewhat plan in place. So some ambiguity there. I would say that's been my experience talking to folks at trade shows and things like that. Is everyone's like, well, we kind of do this, or we sometimes, maybe once a year, we put stuff on some LTO or a hard drive or something, so I'm not surprised by that.
Yep.
And then the other question, go ahead, Greg.
I bet the two biggest reasons for why they answer that is time and money. Those are always the two biggest, reasons why they can't do a full DR plan. So We'll address how we can handle that.
I think the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Spoiler alert. And then how often you're running full server restores, looks like the majority of people said once per quarter. I actually think that's pretty good. 66% of our folks polled. That's a pretty good cadence, but we're still, 9% said once per year, 23% said once a month. So those are pretty good cadences. Once a month is very good, but remember, we'll talk about it in a bit, but if your backup, if you're not testing it, it's not really a backup, right? So, but going on to our slide here, Greg, you talked about, the time, we talked about the man hours, right? Like there's a lot of things that keep people away from implementing that full disaster recovery solution, right?
Yeah, so for the traditional DRaaS type services, you need a lot of expertise, whether it's via a consulting firm, an MSP, or you're doing it yourself. There's a lot of time and energy and expenses to maintain that site. Marty mentioned, just keeping the hardware up to date. When there's when the ILO or the DRaaS has some type of 0-day vulnerability, you need to go and update not just your production, but now you need to update your entire DR site to make sure that that's not an entrance point for attackers. So what we've seen is for the people who have, a very low RTO, say 1 hour, they need to be up and running in an hour or less. That's where DRaaS plays a great role. You could have real-time replication, you could do Veeam CDP or Veeam replication with hourly snapshots. So you have a low recovery point objective of, CDP is near zero, replication is say hourly, and the RTO could be less than an hour. But that's a very complex and expensive, setup to do all that. For those who need it and those who can afford it, it's great. But for the rest of the world, which is probably 90% of businesses, don't really need to be up and running in an hour. And they could legitimately go down for, say, 24 hours, especially when they look at the cost difference, $5,000, $10,000 a month for a 1 hour RTO, or a couple $100 a month for a 24-hour RTO. And that's a business decision to make between the cost of that downtime for the 24 hours versus the cost of, keeping that 1 hour RTO.
Yeah. So I am guessing that CloudIBR solves a lot of those problems.
Yep. Yep. It eliminates the offsite maintenance of Site B. So there is no Site B that you need to maintain. And it gives you, for the people who aren't spending those thousands of dollars a month for DRaaS, they're basically just doing backups, and they're testing their backups. If they're using Veeam, maybe they're using Sure Backup internally, which allows you to confirm that your backups are good, that all the servers will boot up, and it does it, locally on your Veeam server. However, most people don't have an ability to do that with their backups that are stored at Backblaze. So they're testing their local backups, they're doing restores, and they're sending all this data to Backblaze, but do they know if it's recoverable? And how would they recover it? Most people, and actually one of our clients, there's a slide from them later in the presentation, they had about a 2-week RTO. And that was, they were going to order hardware, they were going to find a place to send the hardware, basically their recovery site. Then they'd have to get that hardware shipped, get it racked and stacked, get it powered on, get all their IP addressing in place. And now, once they have that physical infrastructure built, then they could do a recovery from Backblaze with Veeam. But that was probably, the recovery itself probably took about 12 to 24 hours, but it would take 2 weeks to get all that equipment. So what we've done is we've built a way that can do all of that for you in less than 24 hours.
That's amazing.
Let me add on to that, it's kind of going from the last slide to this slide. With Veeam, there's a lot of options for recovery, right? We always say there's all of these options to recover data. I can recover apps, I can recover just files, folders, and we also give the ability to recover to different clouds, right? I mean, we do have the ability to recover to other hyperscalers. But when it comes down to it, recovering, say, for example, a SQL server, and SQL's up and running somewhere, right? I recovered all of my whole server into, say, into one of these clouds. That doesn't set up the networking, right? The connection, the connectivity point is the hard part, right? Doing the recovery from Veeam, that's the easy button, right? That's not that hard. I can recover a lot of places with Veeam right in the UI, boom, 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 done. It's up and running. Is how do I get my applications and my users networked and talking to that recovered server? That's really the key, right? Because recovering a server, that's not the hard part. It's making sure that all of the business processes and customers and end users that need that data or need that server and that application are talking to it. That's the real sweet spot when it comes to disaster recovery planning and testing.
Which I think will be great. And actually in the next slide, I think it is, we talk about how we do all that. So just a quick overview is, so what does Cloud Instant Backup Recovery do? Essentially, it's a fully automated software as a service platform that you take about 20 to 30 minutes to set up. You go through some screens. We'll show you that in a little bit. And once you're onboarded, the software will automatically reach out to, in this case, we use PhoenixNAP. You can see in the third circle there. So PhoenixNAP Bare Metal Cloud, they have physical servers sitting there waiting to be utilized. Our software reaches out, provisions a handful of servers, anywhere from 2 to 9, 10 servers, depending on your recovery requirements. We boot all that up. We create the networking that Marty's mentioned about. So we do OpenVPN, IPsec tunnels. We build all the NAT mappings, the firewall, everything you need that you pre-program into CloudIBR. We build that all out in less than an hour. So rather than having to pick up the phone to call your vendor to buy hardware and ship it somewhere, we provision that hardware for you in less than an hour. That's when we begin the automated recovery process, where we start restoring all of your servers into that environment. I think the next screen, yep. So Marty, I know you've actually used this personally. Yeah,
so this is great, right? Because it's what you're looking at here is basically the Veeam part and the Backblaze part are what you need, right? If those are the two requirements to do CloudIBR. So in order for me to be a CloudIBR customer, all I need is Veeam running and Backblaze. And I could have Backblaze either as a sobered tier, capacity tier offload, or I could have the direct to object, right? As a V12, I had the ability to set it up as a direct to object repository. And I actually, when Greg first brought this to me a while back, he was like, hey, you want to test this out with me? So I took my home lab and I set it up and I, was testing it out and I would do a few things. And then obviously, like everything else, I got busy with work and other things. And I totally forgot about it for a minute. And then I get my report once a month that says, hey, your test worked. And Greg's going to show you that in a little while here when we get into the demo. But it automatically, even though I forgot it was set up and running, it automatically at the end of the month where it did the test for me, sent me a PDF that said, hey, we booted your stuff up and tested it and it was all working. And I'm like, oh yeah, forgot about that. So that's really all the requirements are. If I've got Veeam and I've got a Backblaze bucket, I'm good to go. I can sign up for CloudIBR and have this DR as a service through CloudIBR running.
Yeah, it's great is you mentioned forgetting about it and then getting that report. So basically zero admin costs throughout the month.
Yeah.
Sitting there doing its thing. The challenge is, with people who have DRaaS is they also forget about it. And it doesn't automatically test once a month.
Right.
So you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of building out Site B, getting all this great stuff up and running. If you don't have at least one or two people dedicated to standing it up and running those monthly tests, and you forget about it, and it doesn't bring you that much value. It did the day you set it up, but your environment changes. As your production environment changes, you need to keep your DR up to date. And what our solution does is if something changes in your environment that causes an issue with recovery, you'll get that monthly report and it'll show you exactly what went wrong and here's what you need to fix. So it makes it really, it makes it really easy and keeps it top of mind because you're constantly getting that reminder. So here's sorry, go on, Troy.
No, I was just going to say, I know this is what Marty was so excited about earlier. Make sure we show off, some of that really cool stuff that CloudIBR can do in regards to networking, right? So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is, again, Greg will talk more about this, but the key part there is on what's going to happen when we run the test is the CloudIBR is going to provision the hardware at PNAP. So I've got my ESX hosts. It's going to provision a VBR in that same exact spot. And again, Greg will show you in the demo, it creates, we're going to create a read-only API key to access that bucket so that VBR that stands up at PNAP does a read-only copy into the bucket to scan your backups. And the key part of that is since it's a read-only, means I'm not modifying the backups that are sitting there. The backups that you're currently running from your production continue to run and upload to Backblaze. The backups that are there do not get modified. So there's no ransomware thing or a hit against immutability. It's a read-only copy. And then I'm going to actually restore those backups onto those ESXi hosts. And then, as Greg said before, I can provision that IPsec tunnel back to another remote office or even the ones for my clients to get in. And I think I stole some of your thunder, Greg, but
I love that you know as much about it as I do. I love that. That's a compliment. So the read-only key that you talk about, that's a huge part of it is we didn't want to have access to the customer's production environment in order to make DR work, which is what traditional DRaaS is. You need Site A and Site B to have that connectivity. And if the attackers attack your DRaaS provider and they get into their facility, and we've heard it happen. We've heard it happen, many times, where the MSP is attacked, and now because that MSP is they're able to get access to their environment, they then spread out to all their customers who have that site A to site B connectivity to the customer sites. So with CloudIBR, we have no connectivity into your facility whatsoever. It's completely independent. The only thing we need from the customer is that read-only key to read their Backblaze bucket at time of recovery. And what you can see here on the screen, what we build out is multiple ESXi hosts, the Windows server that runs Veeam. We build a Ubuntu firewall that runs all of your OpenVPN, your IPsec tunnels, and it's all running on a 25 gigabit VLAN with NVMe storage, super fast storage, and no connectivity back to your facility until you actually run a recovery, and then it'll connect with the VPN.
So cool. So I think, Greg, now it's your time to show people exactly how, it sounds too good to be true, right? Oh, you're giving me this really affordable, simple option to get a reliable disaster recovery plan in place. So I'll turn it over to you to run the show and show everyone here what this all looks like.
Awesome. Thank you, Troy. So the reason it's so easy is because it's 100% automated. So when a customer signs up, basically the first thing they need to do, either themselves or with their help of their MSP or consulting firm, they need to just fill out these few tabs over here. So I'll walk quickly through. Essentially, you're adding in your Backblaze repository. You can have multiple. Here are the directions how to create the read-only key. You click on some of the links, it'll bring you to the right place to do all the work. There's screenshots to walk you through that. Once you fill out all this information below and you click save at the bottom, then it'll save it to your backup. So that's it. You add your bucket or multiple buckets that have your mission critical servers in it. And as Marty mentioned, those can be done via direct to object storage with V12 and above, or with V10 and above sober offloads, scale out backup repository offloads to your Backblaze bucket capacity tier. All right, this next tab, we automatically create the account for you at PhoenixSnap, and I'll get into why we create an account for you and why it's created at PhoenixSnap for each individual customer. You add in your storage requirements, you put your terabytes, what you need for recovery, and how much memory, depending on the service level you're at with your subscription to CloudIBR. You can go all the way up to 4 terabytes of RAM for recovery. The next step, you enter in your Veeam encryption keys. So whether the Veeam encryption keys are one for all of your jobs, your backup jobs, or you have one per job, you just add as many as you want here. It's that simple. Network information. This is where you're going to give us basically a snapshot of what your network looks like. The VLANs, all the different gateways that are in your production network that the servers that we recover will need to use to get out to the internet. And then any port mappings you want. It's as simple as clicking add, fill in these 3 fields, click save, and you can see if you're still running on-prem Exchange, email, Microsoft Exchange or some other mail server, you can put this, your mail, your web servers, etc. The next page, this is for the IT staff only to add in, say, their home WAN IP and their corporate WAN IP. This is what's going to give them access to to access the physical equipment we stand up in the PhoenixSnap bare metal cloud. This is not multi-tenant solution. This is dedicated hardware. So at time of recovery, we're spinning up X number of servers. We're handing them to you. We're doing all these restores, all this automation. And once in a real DR event, when we hand this over to you, you're going to want to manage it because it's now your new production environment. So that's where these whitelist IPs come in, is your IT staff can log in and have console access to each host. And the last tab is VPN. So we support 2 different types of VPN, IPsec tunnels, where you add it, gives you the directions. All of the directions for the software is in line. As many subnets that are behind the firewall, you add all them. And you can add as many IPsec tunnels as you need. And then we also do open VPN. So this would be for your laptop, traveling employees, people who are working from home, who aren't behind a corporate firewall and still need access to your recovery environment. So you just add them. The DR testing users are going to be your IT staff and maybe some of the power users who are going to be involved in every DR test. End users, those are people who are only going to be involved in DR tests that you choose for them to be, as well as an actual recovery. And that's it. You're done. You've onboarded. What
I love, Greg, is that the direction's in line, right? So when I want to go add my Backblaze bucket, the instructions and the links are there on how to create that read-only key, right? So right along the way, everything is documented for me to make it easier to just sign up, to see what I need, how I need to create it. It's right there in line. It's so simple. And I will say, because you touched on the multi-tenancy. So when Greg's talking about the multi-tenancy, it's the recovered environment is not multi-tenant, but it is set up, the CloudIBR, to be MSP friendly. So there is a where you can sign up as an MSP, and then from there you can sign up your customers under your MSP portal. So it is friendly to MSPs. If you are an MSP and you want to take advantage of it, there is that capability as well. But under the covers, when it does a recovery, that recovery, those ESXi hosts in that environment is dedicated to that customer.
Yeah, 100%. So even as an MSP who could have dozens of customers signed up, you'll be able to see them in this top right up here where it says the Backblaze demo. So as an MSP, when you click that option, you would see all your customers below it. And you can click on each individual customer, go and you can do their onboarding. You can run a recovery test, and the hardware for each of those customers will be dedicated at time of recovery. So speaking of kicking off a recovery, it's as simple as this. You've finished your onboarding, and whether it's an ad hoc test you want to run or an actual disaster, you click on the Start Recovery button, you scroll to the bottom, and you click on Initiate Recovery. And that's how you launch a recovery. There are a couple options, so I'll go through them real quick. An auto shutdown, that's going to do all this stuff that we talked about with bringing up the physical servers. We're going to install Veeam. We're going to add your Backblaze bucket, scan the bucket, decrypt your backups using the Veeam encryption key, and then automatically begin restoring all of your servers onto the ESXi hosts. We do support, so from the source servers, we support Hyper-V hosts, Hyper-V backups, VMware backups, agent-based backups, whether Linux or Windows for agent-based. So it's, even though we're restoring to ESXi, we can restore it from any source of that Veeam protects. At the end of that recovery process, it automatically shuts everything down, and you get a report, which basically, I'll show you. And you can see I ran this one 51 minutes ago. So you get this report. This will get emailed to you via a PDF attachment. And you can also come in here and view it in the console. And you can view it live while the recovery is running. So what we see is the first thing is, basically what I'm emulating here is I forgot to enter, or I entered the wrong encryption key for one of the backups. So it's telling me, hey, I couldn't restore this. And all I got to do is go over to the Veeam encryption keys, add another one, and now I can, rerun the test, the recovery test, and see that one recover. Here you can see the servers I restored, IP addresses, etc. If I expand down the tear down complete section here, the overview, you can see my recovery took 1 hour and 19 minutes. So we talked about RTO before, the recovery time objective. For our environment, it's just under 2 terabytes. And what we see is about a 45-minute period it takes to build out the equipment. And then we see about just under 2 terabytes per hour for doing a restore. So if you have, if you're a 5 terabyte customer, you could be up and running in probably like 4 hours or so. And I'd say the most we've seen, the highest we've seen is about 18 hours. And that's for someone who's in the 20 to 30 terabyte range.
Yeah, we actually had a question come in about how fast the recovery can go from Backblaze to Phoenix Snap. So thank you for preemptively answering that question, Greg.
Cool. And I'll geek out a little bit more on that answer since someone asked. So with Veeam, we typically see about 150 megabytes per second per concurrent task, which is, over 800 megabits per second. So you get really good throughput per concurrent task. For a file server that has a single 10 terabyte job, it'll take, X number of hours. But if that same file server has 5 2 terabyte drives, it'll restore and recover almost 5 times as fast, because Veeam can be doing, that recovery. So traditionally what we see is when a customer runs a recovery, within the first couple hours, their AD servers are up and running. All their small servers, Citrix servers, whatever they have that are, say, less than a couple hundred gigs, those servers all come up within the first few hours. And then those, the one big file server that every customer has, that's where we see that could take, that 12, could take 6 hours, 12 hours, 18, depending on, how large it is. So going back to here, so this exact report is what you get a copy of. Everything you see on the screen is in the PDF report. Tells you how many were successful. We had the one skipped. We'll cover why that was skipped in a moment. 0 failed. Go down here to recovery credentials. You can see we created all the VPN accounts for every user on the VPN tab that you add. And this is running OpenVPN. These users, during a manual recovery, each one of the DR test users you create will get an encrypted email with a link to install the OpenVPN software, a link to the VPN config, and all and their credentials for their VPN. During a real DR event, your end users will get that as well.
Nice.
Here, these are the 2 physical servers for my demo environment that got built out. So one is the ESXi host where we restore all your servers to, and the other is the Veeam server that actually processes all the recoveries. The third one is virtual. That's the firewall that we build, which covers everything under this section. All of the NAT mappings that you added to the network config page, those all get configured on that firewall, along with the IPsec tunnels, the OpenVPN, the port mappings, and then finally, down here. So we had one skip server, and if you see here, it says it's because it's older than the 7-day threshold. So by default, we only restore servers that have a valid backup from within the past 7 days. Reason being is if you decom a server in production, but you have it in your bucket for X number of years for retention policy, you obviously don't need that recovered in a DR event. And you can change that anywhere from 1 to 30 days.
That's awesome.
That's also another key thing that somebody might miss. And I think we talked about this before, Greg. You were saying like you had a customer that had this happen in their report, and then they realized that their backups weren't running, right? So it's another way to say, hey, my automatic recovery happened and it skipped a server because it was missing backups. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, my backups, either my backups weren't running, number one, or number two, my offload to Backblaze wasn't working.
Yeah, they did. They got an email that said you had 14 skipped servers, and they had 14 servers, that they didn't want skipped. And when they looked at it, it said because all your backups were 9 days older than that 7-day threshold, or 2 days older than that. And what they realized is their backups hadn't run in 9 days. So they obviously are, they set up things and put things in place to catch that sooner than later.
Yeah.
So that's the entire product. It's that simple. You onboard. For the MSPs, as you invite customers into here, you'll have access to all of their settings here so that you can onboard each one, provide the professional services, and then you can run recoveries for them whenever they want. By default, our recoveries run monthly. So once you onboard and everything's configured, every month you'll get an automated report showing you that this ran, it went through that process. If you want to involve your IT staff or even end users in doing DR testing, when you start the recovery, you would pick the manual option. And the main difference is we do all the same exact work, all the same automation to get everything up and running, as we talked about earlier, but we don't power it down. We leave it up indefinitely. And now you can test your IPsec tunnels. You can test your OpenVPN creds. You can test any port mappings that you opened. And you can log in, you can test applications, make sure all your servers are healthy. And then once you're done, you log in back to this portal, you click on the recovery, and you hit the stop recovery button, and that'll tear down the environment. So
I love how simple this is, Greg. I think I said this the other day, right? Like my engineering brain is thinking about like all the things I'd have to do in an Ansible playbook or in a Python script, right, to get this all to work, like the APIs and the CLIs I'd have to all figure out. And like you've made this just into a button, which is so cool.
Yes, I appreciate it. We took 2.5 decades of DR experience and determined, how do we make that automated? How do we make it affordable? And you know what? I skipped that one part, so let me bring it back to the screen.
I'm sure people are curious about how much this costs, Greg.
There you go. Yeah. So there's 3 price points. And let me zoom out a little. So silver, gold, platinum. You can see the monthly fees up top. The first difference between them is right here, which is how much RAM you get in the ESXi hosts at time of recovery. So most small businesses can easily run with a terabyte. And then as you get bigger, you're hitting 30, 40, 50 guests, you get your 2 terabytes. And then for the larger servers, 4 terabytes. We can go higher than this. These are just the packaged options that we have online that so far have met the needs of 100% of the people, that have reached out to us and signed up. The next significant item is the IPsec tunnels. That's included in the gold and up. So if you don't need an IPsec tunnel back to any of your branch offices, then the silver will work great. Otherwise, get the gold or platinum. And then there is one more fee. So this is an annual fee we charge you. You do the 149 times 12 to sign up for the actual usage. So we talked about you don't have to order equipment. You don't need a DR, a Site B for DR. What we do instead is you simply pay hourly for the software that for the hardware that you use during a recovery. And I'm going to bring up another screen to show you how you can calculate that hourly fee. So let me bring this here. So on our site, if you go to the us.cloudibr.com/calculator, you can see here we have some pricing broken out. So the Veeam server, 16 to 29 cents per hour, your Windows licensing, your IP block, all very insignificant numbers. And if you go down to the bottom and you put in, I need this much memory, and let's say I need, 5 terabytes of space, it's a whopping $2.35 per hour for your test. For this size customer, they're probably doing about a 2-hour test a month because it doesn't take that long. As you get into the higher, you go to 10, 15, 20, you'll see the price, update from there. So if your test is taking, say, 8 hours a month and it's a $4, you're looking at $33 a month in hourly usage fees. So pretty inexpensive compared to the traditional options of DRaaS, even the public cloud, whether it's any of the major public clouds, they're all going to be more expensive than this and require a lot more complexity.
And make it harder to get back too. That's another thing we didn't talk about is, okay, how do I go back to my site when I'm done, right? So again, with here, another add-on of having the IPsec tunnel is if I need to go back, right? So my DR's done, I'm ready to, I've rebuilt my production environment and I want to go back to on-prem, I can use that IPsec tunnel and Veeam to do replication back to my on-prem environment and then fail back, or I can do backups and recoveries. Either way, it makes it easier for me to come back.
If
I go to public cloud or something, there's a lot more work and heavy lift to come back to on-prem.
Yeah, and I brought this slide back up to show how that works, because that's an awesome point, Marty. So when you recovered our environment, this is now your new production. And one of the first things you want to do is you want to RDP into the Veeam server that we built for you. And you want to configure your backups to start backing up your new production environment every night to Backblaze. Now, eventually, you're going to want to switch back to your production site. And depending on the type of incident, so what we've seen a lot with is with ransomware. When ransomware affects your production facility, you basically have to put the yellow police tape around the data center. You have the forensics adjusters from the insurance companies. You might even have the FBI involved. So these people don't want you just restoring last night's backup and getting back up and running because you won't have an insurance claim. They want to make sure you did your due diligence, that it truly was a ransomware attack. So with that, you recover to CloudIBR. You immediately begin backing up to Backblaze that night to get your new production sent there. And once your physical environment is either rebuilt, if it was a fire or a flood, the traditional, types of DR that, everyone's worked on the past several decades, you get that environment rebuilt. Or if it's ransomware, once you're allowed to overwrite that, you can do one of two things. You can either do a restore from Backblaze onto your production site and get, and basically your RTO to get back to production will be pretty similar to your RTO to actually fail over to CloudIBR. Or if you want to spend a little bit more time using your Veeam, it's the Veeam server that we build for you. You add your, whether it's ESX, vCenter, Hyper-V, et cetera, you add that into the backup infrastructure tab of Veeam, and you create replication jobs to snapshot the servers over every hour. And then this Saturday at 10 a.m. at your leisure, you go into Veeam, you shut down our environment and do a failover to your production, and you're back up and running.
Yep, that's great.
So with that, here's a quick quote, and then we're going to hand it back to you, Troy. This is one of our customers. I mentioned them earlier. They had about a 2.5 week RTO, and the plan was to order hardware, get it all shipped to that site. And back during the height of the pandemic, when the supply chain was backed up, that could have taken as easily as a month. So with that, they went to about a 6-hour RTO right now using CloudIBR.
All right. So I want to do this really quickly because we have a ton of questions. We'll try and do a lightning round after this because we only have about 10 minutes. But I mentioned we got an offer for CloudIBR and Backblaze. If you are a current Backblaze B2 customer, whether you are, we have two different ways to purchase it, right? You go to the website, you put your credit card in, or you purchase it through a reseller with our capacity model called B2 Reserve. Doesn't matter. If you are a B2 customer, we're giving you $600 off your first year of CloudIBR annual subscription off of any plan, right? If you are not a customer today, or maybe you're just have a credit card down or whatever, for new reserve customers, so these are customers who have purchased through one of our reseller partners, we're giving you a full year of silver annual subscription at no charge. The other thing I want to make sure I point out is, we at Backblaze, we do not, we give you egress up to 3 times what you store. However, we have part of the reason, we love the partnership with CloudIBR is because they use PhoenixSnap. And with PhoenixSnap, we actually offer unlimited egress. So you can go beyond that 3x threshold as much as you want. If you want to test your disaster recovery every day, you're not going to pay a penny in egress. So that's part of the reason we really, really love this partnership. So if you're interested in this, please shoot us an email, cloudibr@backblaze.com. You can also just scan that little QR code with your phone really quick. And I think I'll leave this up for a moment while we take a few questions so we can try and get to them, get everyone's questions answered. So the first one here comes from Sudipti, and they ask, what are your thoughts on data protection and privacy when we use cloud-based disaster recovery? I'll talk a little bit about the Backblaze part of it. Obviously, we offer immutability, which means that, your data is locked by Veeam so that no one can delete, modify, or change those files whatsoever, right? So your backup is safe and secure. We also offer industry-leading SLAs for, availability, durability, right? So, oftentimes it's more reliable than just having all your stuff backed up locally, because, we have all these data centers and all your data is, sharded and has parity and all that good stuff. So, but as far as maybe the data protection with the disaster recovery portion of it, maybe Greg, you want to chime in there, or Marty?
Sure. So one note I want to make. So in order to be eligible for that $600 off, make sure you get the link from Backblaze to use when you register for CloudIBR. That will tag you as a lead from this webinar, which entitles you to that, and they'll give you the rest of the information. As far as data protection, so the beauty of what we've built is, and I've said it a couple of times, is it's dedicated equipment at time of disaster. This isn't a multi-tenant environment where you're running on the same hosts as everyone else. This is your equipment. It's just as if you bought the equipment yourself and did your own DR. So you can't get any more secure than that, is when when it's dedicated to you.
And Greg's added on the whitelists, right? So that access to that hardware has a whitelist to it as to what IPs are allowed to get at that ESXi host, whether it's through through the VPN tunnel or the whitelist access. So that helps, again, keep access limited to those hosts that's dedicated to you.
Awesome. Paul is asking us, what about using a recovery vault with an airlock?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Recovery vault. So, if you want me to hit the questions that I know the answer to real quick. So, the very first in my list I see from Phil Cowan, from the Hemet Unified School District. Are you billed hourly for monthly testing? So yes, we covered that. That's on the calculator. If you go to us.cloudibr.com/calculator, you can figure out exactly what your hourly billing is. Marco Sorrentino from Sorrent.lab asks, are these plans fixed or customizable? So the 3 plans on the site are fixed, where you get up to the 0.5 terabyte, 2 terabyte, and 4 terabyte of RAM, plus the additional add-ins that were on the bottom of that matrix. If you need something greater than that, then yes, we can absolutely customize them. When you reach out to Backblaze and with your QR code, they'll schedule a meeting for us to do a live demo, answer any questions you have, and that should help with that. Jeff Heminger asks, is there any bare metal usage included in onboarding to validate? There is. So if you go through, use the Backblaze link, use the promo code that they're going to give you, that's going to give you 30 days of free usage of CloudIBR and the PhoenixNAP bare metal. So as long as you already have Veeam in place and you're already backing up to Backblaze, you'll use that promo code to sign up for CloudIBR. And within 20 to 30 minutes, you could be running your first recovery. For the next 30 days, you can run as many recoveries as you want, absolutely free. And then you can choose at the end of the 30 days whether or not you want your subscription to go live. And that's when hourly fees would kick in, as well as your annual subscription.
On a few of the others, there's the one from Paul Cohen about getting back. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. The recovery back could either be failback through Veeam replication afterwards, once you're ready to go back to your environment, or you could do a backup and recovery to your location as well. Chris Stammerman, Hyper-V and VMware. I think Greg covered that as well. If it is Hyper-V, we can recover it on VMware. I have to test this. I'm pretty sure I've got Nutanix AHV backups in my lab, so I got to test that. But I'm pretty sure those would work as well, because with the Veeam recovery, as long as we can read those Veeam backups, we should be able to recover
100%
into VMware, and agents as well. Greg did say agents was available. So if I have something that Veeam doesn't know about at a hypervisor level, if it's backed up by an agent, it'll get recovered as a VM in the CloudIBR.
Yeah. Prince asks, will we be sending the recording? Absolutely. You'll get an email from Bright Talk after the webinar today with a link to this that you'll be able to replay, send to others, anything you need to do.
Yep. And then Brandon Baldonado from ABQ Protection. The bigger the terabyte, is it slower? So it's not slower, it just takes longer. So whether you have 1 terabyte or 100 terabytes, it runs just as fast, which I mentioned earlier. We see about an average of 150 megabytes per second in the Veeam UI, which equates to 8 times 150, so about 1.2 gigabits per second, and that's per individual concurrent stream. So a larger server will take longer than a smaller server, especially if all the data is on one large VMDK or a VHD with VMware. So sorry, with Hyper-V, and we do 100% support Hyper-V as well.
Yeah, I'll just point out, I forgot to mention this earlier. I apologize. Right, if you are not a Veeam customer, right, we can also set you up with a 30-day free Veeam trial. And for those of you that are interested in, maybe you only have a couple hours, maybe you're interested in this, saying I don't have time to try it. The best way to try this out in a quick manner is get a hold of us first, right? And we'll get you set up with all the free trials. And with Veeam version 12, you'll be able to do a direct to object backup. So what that's going to allow you to do is, typically how you did it in the past was you use what's called a SOBR, a scale-up backup repository, where you have local storage and then your cloud storage, and you take advantage of that as one kind of big joint repository. You can tier things out or archive them, right? And now with version 12, you can go direct to objects. You don't need to have any local storage to test this out, right? Yep. You can go directly to Backblaze, directly into Phoenix Snap with CloudIBR, and you just saw this, right? Greg's demo took a few minutes. Setting up a Backblaze account is even quicker. So just want to throw that out there. If you're interested, don't have Veeam today, but still would like to give this a try, please do. Excellent. Other questions? I know we're short on time here.
Lynn asks, how does CloudIBR contribute to faster recovery times? It's not really about the faster recovery times. It's the improved data, right? The improved and reduced operational complexity, right? That's what it's taking out. So the speed is what we're getting out of Backblaze into PNAP. The complexity compartment is really what we're taking care of, right? All of the plumbing, the networking, and that kind of goes along with Antonio's question about a service exposed to public IPs. Greg did cover that earlier. When you're setting up your networking, there's a place that you can put in there, I need this port for this IP address. When it gets recovered into the CloudIBR, would open that up for the public internet to get access, whether it's a port 80 for a web server or 443, or you need to get into RDP access to a server from a web portal. If you got email on-prem still, you port 25, it's all there.
Yeah, the port mappings, you open up as many ports as you need. I see two more questions from Mia Jackson and David Kloss, who have similar questions. They ask about how often should they conduct risk assessments and vulnerability scans? And then what does our organization have to put in place to ensure cyber resilience, including prevention, detection, and response strategies? So as a SaaS provider for backup recovery as a service, our software is what's allowing you to recover in the event that you're compromised or you have a physical disaster. But we do have plenty of MSSPs out there that we partner with. So if you're looking for advice on, who's good to work with, definitely reach out, scan the QR code, and we can give you some great recommendations for partners to talk to regarding doing the vulnerability, penetration testing, et cetera. Most companies are doing it at least once a year. If you do, maybe one penetration test per year, 4 vulnerability scans per year, depending on your budget, really is what that comes down to.
Yeah, Paul comes back with that question on the air gap versus the recovery vault type thing. Well, the storage at Backblaze is immutable storage. So it is air gapped in that regard, that it is immutable. It also is a disconnect from the local network, right? So if I get hacked on a local network, there is a disconnect there. However, truly air gapped, air locked, I don't know if Backblaze offers that storage, but that makes it much harder to recover from, right? I know people still use tape because tape is technically, air gapped across. I can take the tape out of the library and nobody can get access to it, but that's also much harder to recover from. Like I got to put that tape in somewhere and scan it to recover, right? So
a lot of awesome questions. I think there's one last one, and then Troy, I think we'll wrap it up.
Then we'll wrap it up.
I could go on all day and answer more questions, but Brian Page from Hirschner's Inc. Can you talk about failback from your DR solution? So we covered that a little bit, where once you have that environment up and running in our facility, there's two things. First, you want to immediately begin backing up your new production servers to Backblaze. And then second, once you have your primary location physically back online and available to accept your servers back into production, we can use Veeam. Very simply, you go into the Veeam, you create a replication job, you pick all the servers that we recovered at CloudIBR, and you point them to your vCenter, Hyper-V, whatever it is in your building. And then you do hourly snapshots, and then say this Saturday, 10 a.m., you shut down all the guests in your recovered environment with CloudIBR, and you let that last replication snapshot occur, and then you click the, right click on all your servers and do failover now. So very easy solution to do failbacks because of Veeam and what Veeam's done.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We went a minute over. I apologize. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Greg. Thank you guys so much for your expertise and joining us today. And if we didn't get your questions answered, again, please reach out to us, CloudIBR@Backblaze.com. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have or schedule a call to go over CloudIBR and Backblaze and Veeam some more. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Yep. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye now.